Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Lady K Chat, a podcast that is designed for men and women to become better versions of themselves, which is broadcast every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Various subjects will be spoken upon, such as relationships, health and wellness, personal development, wealth building, children, and so much more. She is a two-time Amazon best-selling author, an international speaker, and life coach. She is Lady K. And now for your host, Lady K.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lady K Chat podcast. I am your favorite host, and today is a very special day. It is election day, and I hope you are out there vote. Today, while you are out there voting, my special guest and I will be discussing the presidential election, so you can keep in mind as you're going out there to vote the facts that took place for the past 4 years, and especially this buffoonery for the past year. So everyone, I want you to help me welcome this amazing woman who changed the political and leadership landscape for Latinos. This is Dr. Damary Bonilla-Rodriguez. She ran for the state representative in the 189th district back in Pennsylvania. She became the first Hispanic to make a state ballot in Pike and Monroe counties. She became the first Hispanic elected as school board in the East Stroudsburg area school district. And in addition, she was appointed by Governor Tom Wolf to represent the Pocono region of the statewide Commission of Redistricting, Reform, and Latino Affairs. Everyone, please help me welcome Dr. Damary Bonilla-Rodriguez. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love your energy, and I'm looking forward to this important conversation today.
Absolutely. I couldn't wait for this. And first of all, let me ask you what you call. Would you want me to call you Damary, or do you want me to call you Dr. Bonilla-Rodriguez?
Oh, you can call me Damary. That's A-okay. I think the doctor is more important because sometimes people make assumptions that people of color don't have the credentials, right? Or don't have the educational attainment, and we do.
Absolutely.
And so in certain spaces, it's important to use those credentials as a way to get in the door or be heard. But in this space, we are friends and having good discussion to help our community. So Damary is fine. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I also appreciate you taking the time of accepting my invitation, because I know you are a very busy woman, but we all know that today was a special day and we could not pass this up. But one of the key things that I wanted to say for this whole election is that I want you guys to keep in mind the very first presidential debate. How when I was watching it, it looked like two kids on the playground fighting. And Damary, one of my strong questions for you is, why do you think people are dismissing Donald Trump's behavior?
Yeah, this is such a long and wide topic, right? But one of the arguments that I hear from Trump supporters is that he's not a politician, right? That they voted for him and support him because he's not a typical politician. And you hear some of that in the presidential debate. You've heard it, right? And you've kind of heard it every day, where they're saying Biden has been in politics for 47 years and Trump has not, and he's not a politician. So the reality is that we do have a base of voters that is disenfranchised on both sides of the aisle, where they feel like politicians are not representing their interest, or once they get into office, they're not actually doing anything for the people they represent. And therefore, the people are looking for individuals that are not typical politicians so that they feel like they're being represented. So that's the biggest argument that I hear. I'm concerned that some individuals are actually racist, misogynistic, and all of the other isms that he is, and that him saying it gives them permission to be that, even if they don't say it out loud, right? But I'm concerned that there are individuals that do share those sentiments. And we've seen a lot more of that surface after he was elected in 2016. So that for me is something to be mindful of, that there are individuals that really do feel the way he feels, and he's saying it out loud, and he's giving them permission to be that way.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback off what you said, because you said some key things, because people are looking for certain things because we are in a new day and time. But the key thing is, what happened to integrity? Prior to this election and the other president's candidate that ran, you always see that they walked in integrity, or they even try to make sure when they are represented in front of the public that they hold themselves accountable. And I just don't see that. So I'm having a hard time grasping, why would you want someone that's in the chair that holds no accountability and has lack of integrity?
Well, you're certainly preaching to the choir, because to me, when you hold the highest office in the land, you should be held to higher standards. You should be able to represent the values of the American people, which are a diversity of people, right? We represent a myriad of demographics. We represent a myriad of values and views, and he's not representative of that. If you think about the way that we allow and don't allow our children to behave, right? You wouldn't allow your children to say some of the things that the president of the United States says about other individuals, right? Or the isms that he so freely spits out on Twitter from the podium at press conferences at the White House. It's utterly disgusting, because I would not allow my kids to do that, and they are 10 years old.
Right.
But yet we voted in, and I say we because I'm an American, and this happened. Of course, election integrity is something that we've been talking about in the past couple of weeks, and that today we're going to see. The majority of the people in 2016 voted for Hillary Clinton, but the Electoral College chose Donald Trump. So that further disenfranchises people, because they feel like, my vote doesn't count, right? Why should I vote? And I have this sticker that I've been kind of wearing and saying, right, let's just remind ourselves that every vote counts. Your vote does count. It may not be reflected in who wins the election, because other dynamics happen behind the scenes. But my encouragement, right, is that the more people like you and I get involved, the more people that are parents and run for school board to represent the interests of the children and the parents, the better policies will be in place, the better the curriculum will relate to the students and the families that are represented there. And so I just want to take this time to encourage people to not just cast your vote, because that's the first thing, is your vote counts. Your vote is your voice. Come out and cast your vote today, but also stay engaged. Civic engagement is critical to being sure that the people that are in office are representative of you, your values, your interests. And it will take time for us to get out, these individuals that don't represent the people, but we need everybody engaged, even if you have difference of opinion, because that's okay. It's the disrespect, it's the racism, it's the demeaning of individuals that is not okay.
Right, absolutely. And Damary, you said something very key, and this was my argument that I had with someone just recently. You say, a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't need to vote. But if voting was not so important for the people that was in our community, why did they stop us for a long period of time to not to vote? And then when they were able to vote, they make them go through like, oh, you have to take a writing exam or reading exam, knowing darn well that was not the case that they had to do. So I keep reminding people, if voting was not so important, why did they held off our grandparents and our parents to not to vote? That speaks a lot of volume. And on top of that, like you said, there's a little bit more to it, behind the scenes. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Are you educated in that area, what goes on behind the scene when someone don't vote? And like you said, the majority might cast the vote, and that's how Donald Trump became president?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because kids at the elementary school level in our community are learning right now about the US Constitution and, government, how government works, the various branches of government, and learning, the back and forth that happened when the Electoral College was formed. And so the reality is that the process was put in place many years ago as a way to ensure that small states were not left behind, right? That population only did not dictate an election, so that there was equality of voice. That does not relate to racial and ethnic groups that had nothing to do with Blacks earning the right to vote, or Latinos earning the right to vote, or women earning the right to vote. That in itself is civil rights, and those are different fights that had to happen. But this was really about representation and ensuring that the small states weren't swallowed up by the big states in terms of representation. Unfortunately, the Electoral College is pretty outdated in that it doesn't represent some of those demographic interests that we're talking about. And that is why the Black voter, the Latino voter, voters of color, female voters feel further disenfranchised. When you think about those individuals from various backgrounds, not just Latinos, but others that have language barriers, that are US citizens and are able to vote, but they go there and are not fully able to articulate at the polls how can you help me vote? What information do I need? Do I need an ID? Do I not need an ID? But just all of these feelings where they feel small. I've received so many calls leading up to election day from individuals that have said they're fearful, particularly in Pennsylvania, where it's an open carry state and they're just not sure about what's going to happen right at the polls today. And so I encourage people to go out in groups. I encourage people to find a voting buddy. And that's part of what we call having a voting plan, right? Who's going to go vote with you? When are you going to vote? Where is your poll site? Knowing the regulations that after you vote the first time, you do not need an ID to vote. After your first time, when you present your ID, you do not need an ID to vote. But if you go somewhere to vote and at your poll site, they tell you you need it, many people are turned away and do not come back to vote because maybe they only had a few minutes. Maybe they have to go back to work. Maybe they pick up the kids from school and they have to run errands and they don't get back. Those are all forms of voter suppression, throwing rules and regulations out there, right? Changing the rules for certain individuals, anything that will turn somebody away. Oh, I don't understand you because of your language. Okay, well, that's why we need more diverse people working the polls. That's why I've sent emails leading up to today encouraging people to sign up as poll watchers, to sign up as volunteers, so that when voters come to the polls today, they see individuals that look like them, individuals that can speak their language, right? And there's a level of comfort that says, I belong here. My vote is important. We don't have enough of that because over time, we haven't been encouraged. I mean, I remember growing up in New York City and my grandparents loved meeting the elected officials who would shake hands with them at the train station or the grocery stores, right, all along. And then we would go into the poll to vote, and they always needed me to read the information and translate for them. And they always got very nervous about it because they did not dominate the English language. They didn't understand the processes that you and I are talking about. And that's why this podcast and this discussion is important for this 2020 election, but also it's foundational to elections going forward. And I want to use the term that politics is local. So while you and I are talking a lot about the federal level, right, and more general electoral process, really politics are local. So those individuals like myself who serve on your local school board determine whether there's an increase of taxes or not. Now, we do have to take into account the fair funding formula that comes from the state representation, the state legislature, which at this point, they are funding us at 33% for every student, when in the past, the state of Pennsylvania was funding us at 50% for every student, which means that gives us an automatic deficit, right, that we have to make up for. And therefore, either we cut positions, we cut programs and resources, or we raise taxes. And then you add to that the global crisis, the pandemic, which means we're not getting a lot of the dollars that we were getting, which already wasn't enough, right? So when you think about taxes being raised, it's not just that people want to raise taxes. I live in this community. I represent you. I don't want to pay more taxes, but it really is about the dynamics that are happening around you. And we need to further educate our communities to understand how these different branches of government play a role, how local representation matters so much in their day-to-day, from paying taxes, from the curriculum that their students are being exposed to in school, to just day-to-day life. So that's why I really appreciate you creating the forum for this discussion.
I appreciate that, and thank you again for coming. And you said a mouthful, but I want to talk about voter suppression. But before I do, you said something about the purchases of gun, and I do want to make it very clear to everybody. Yes, since this election in 2020 and since the pandemic, there has been an increase in sales of firearms. People are really scared, and it's a shame that it comes to this. And it's like, wow, you know, this is what we're going to be doing moving forward. Use wisdom on how you are utilizing that gun. But you know, you made a really good point on saying that. But back to voter suppression, like you said, a lot of people are not educated, and they need to. Because like you said, if they understand the different levels and what the different levels do, because a lot of people tend to, when the local election does come, a lot of people don't go as much, but like you said, if they realize that the people that you're electorally in, that builds up to the presidential election. And so it does matter at your local level. So yes, get yourself educated, because at the last minute, people be like, well, I don't know who to vote for. And it was like, I don't even know where to go to get information. So can you tell me, where can people actually go to look up, the candidates that's actually running? What website can I refer them to?
That's a great question. One of the things I want to do, piggybacking on what you were saying, and then kind of taking us into information and education, because that is critical.
Right.
One of the things I just noted as you were talking was one issue voter. I want to encourage individuals not to be a one issue voter. Do not get so stuck on one issue and the way that you feel about it without paying attention to the implications of that one issue, right? And we're seeing that with today's election, in terms of people that are saying, well, because of my religious beliefs, I am pro-life, and therefore I have to vote for Donald Trump today because he is pro-life, right? That is not the only issue that is at stake in today's election or in any election. That is important. It is important to you, but understand that just because somebody is from a different political party does not mean that they are anti what you are for, right? So we really do have to, and that leads me to educate, we really do have to educate our voters, particularly voters of color who have been disenfranchised and really don't feel connected enough to want to access this information until election day comes. And as you said, then they're figuring out who they should be voting for because they didn't have the information. So I, for example, consider myself a believer in terms of religious beliefs. I do have a spiritual grounding on faith, but I am pro-choice. And for me, I've taken a lot of heat on the campaign trail from individuals who also identify as believers, who've said, oh, how could you be pro-choice, right? Because if you're a believer. And so to me, that is my personal conviction. And therefore, I feel like everybody should have their choice in what they do with their body. And I should be able to love on them and support them, right? I'm not mad at somebody who says I'm pro-life. What I want you not to do is to get married to that and therefore ignore all of the other things. Back to your first question, right? About somebody's ridiculous behavior and lack of leadership, and just vote for them for that. So that brings me to, we have to continue, and we have a responsibility as individuals to continue to educate ourselves. So a couple of different options. The League of Women Voters is a national organization. It's a nonpartisan organization. They work with everybody on all sides of the aisle, and they focus a lot on education. And we have a League of Women Voters chapter in Monroe County, PA, and Pike County, PA, and across the country. And one of the things that they do before elections is that they publish a workbook, a guide that has information about all candidates who submit their information within the timeline. And they give that option to everybody. If you're a candidate, you're able to share your information and be part of that. That's one opportunity. You can access that online. Another opportunity is this one website, which is kind of like Wikipedia, but it's Ballotpedia. And they collect information, as well as lots of other websites that collect information about candidates. And so even though I ran in 2016, and then I ran again in 2019 and became the first Hispanic elected to the East Stroudsburg Area School District School Board, you can find information about me there, which gives you history about me, right? It tells you where I stand on certain issues. It tells you my beliefs. It tells you what I fight for. It tells you what I signed on for. That is important. So when I run again, if I didn't fill out the survey for the League of Women Voters to be in their workbook or their guidebook, you could still find out information about me. So the information is out there. You get a lot of mailers. I know you have, you get a lot of mailers. You have to be careful what the mailer says. Look at who paid for that mailer. Who paid for that mailer, right, is going to tell you the lens by which they are sharing information. One of the things that happened to me on the campaign trail from individuals who got mailers, negative mailers about me from my opponent, is that when they actually looked me up, looked up my webpage, my social media platforms, they found out that they really liked me. That is the responsibility of an individual, to look up the information and not to just assume that that mailer is correct. And I'm talking to you, and you can't see because it's shoulder length, but my hands are moving, and I can't sit still because democracy is on the line today. Democracy is on the line with the 2020 election, being that we just confirmed a Supreme Court justice that is an extreme conservative. And I'm not saying just conservative, extreme conservative. We have Roe versus Wade on the line. We have Brown versus the Board of Education on the line. We have so many rights that people fought for, that people died for. And even as I'm telling you, I just get goosebumps because it is scary to think that these opportunities that were fought for, that lives were on the line for, can be rolled back. And that what we're facing right now, right, in terms of racism and racial injustice and racial, inequities, that could be, I mean, by a million times worse come tomorrow at this time.
Right. I'm speechless right now because like you really hit home for me with everything you was just saying. And everyone that's listening, I hope you took really key of what she said and how you can utilize these resources so you can know who is the best candidate for you. Again, today is election day. Make it count. Go out there and vote. And Damary, if the people wanted to contact you and follow you, where can they catch you at?
Oh, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, Dr. Damary Bonilla-Rodriguez, and then also through email, Dr. Damary Bonilla-Rodriguez at gmail.com.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Damary. Everyone, we are running out of time, but again, today is election day. Go out there and make your vote count. Y'all have a good night.
Yes, thank you so much. Take good care.
You're welcome. And you can follow us on social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at the Lady K Chat Podcast, and our website at www.ladykenterprisesinc.com.
Lady K.